Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 282. Today we're going to talk about Blue Moon Legends. Now this is a brand new release from Fantasy Flight Game, but it's a reprinting of a game that's about 10 years old called Blue Moon. And basically what this does is collect all of the expansions and extra stuff that was, I think, ever released for the original game, puts it all into one box, and quite frankly, you have a ton of game and variety within the box. But first, before I get to the review, let's talk about how the game works. So here we have everything that comes inside the game box. Now there's a couple of things to take note of. First thing is the board. Now this is a two-player only game, so players are going to be sitting across from each other on different sides of the board. Everybody has a different area for the different zones and things that they're going to be playing cards to. So you've got a draw deck, discard pile, combat area, and then you also have here a support area. And you can see there are little player aids for the turn that each player can reference, and then also there is a leader area for each player. What players are trying to do is they're going to be playing cards out of probably one of these 9 basic decks, or there are other ways to deck build and draft and do all kinds of stuff, which we'll talk about later. But you're playing cards out of your deck to try to win control of these dragons. So as you win control of the dragons, they'll start coming to your side. If your opponent starts to gain control, they'll go back to the middle first. And then once all the dragons are back, then if the opponent continues to win, then they'll start pulling them over to their side. So you're either going to play until somebody gets all 3 dragons onto their side, and then they win a fight which would bring a 4th dragon, which isn't here, to their side. That'll immediately kill the game, or the round I should say. And the other way that the game will end is if somebody runs out of cards in their deck and they basically can't play anymore. I'll go in that a little bit more detail in a second. But you're going to get points. You're either going to play one game and just whoever has, the dragon on their side, or the more dragons, is going to be the winner, or you can play multiple rounds until somebody gets 5 of these crystals. So you're going to get a crystal for winning the game, plus another crystal for each dragon on your side when you win. So if this was the case, I would have received 3 crystals, and I would just need 2 more crystals on my way to victory. Now the heart of the game are these 9 decks, and here you can see the leader cards for the 2 most basic decks. You've got the Volca and the Hoax here, and these are the 2 decks that the rules recommend that you play with. They're the most basic decks. They have the least kind of funkiness to them, I guess you could say. And then as you kind of start playing and learning the game, you can move up to the Mimic, to the Flit, to the Kind, and then so on all the way up to here. And then there is a sort of a ship deck, which is kind of interesting with boats and things. And again, also players will have the ability to add some cards in here. Now I haven't really done any playing with all these extra cards, but here we have different emissaries. Basically what you do is you take an emissary, add it to your leadership, and then you just add those cards to your deck. Now you can also do deck building and drafting and all kinds of cool stuff there. I'm not going to talk about too much about the deck building. I'm going to talk more about the gameplay itself. So I'm going to go take a cue from the rule book and kind of introduce to you the new mechanics that are introduced with some of the different decks as you move along. So let's just start with the basic decks, and we'll go through kind of a basic turn, and then I'll kind of tell you about kind of the main mechanic that each deck introduces. So let's go through a basic turn structure quickly, and then I'll get into some more details. Now as you can see here, we've got the leader area, so each player has their leadership. And one thing to note about the leader card is they give you a little bit of deck building information. This tells you how many cards you need to have in your deck, and these little crystals here are the amount of cards outside of their alignment that they can have. So in this deck, if I wanted to sort of do some deck building, I can add another character here. But if we take a look here, you can see this is going to cost me 1 of those 10 crystal points to splash this character from a different faction inside that deck. Each player is going to have 6 cards in their hand to start the game, and also will draw up to this number at the end of the turn. You'll first go and look at any powers that say at the beginning of your turn, execute XYZ. In this case, we don't have anything out. Then we'll go into the leadership step. In this case, you have the opportunity, you may play a leadership card from your hand. So if we take a look here, we've got a leadership card, and we can play exactly 1 of these, and then you play it, and you can see here's the effect that it does. So when you do this, it says, now I may discard with a total printed value of at least 8 fire from my hand to immediately attract 1 dragon. Pretty cool. Well, in this case, we'd go ahead and look at these. We've got 4, 7, 9 fire. So if we wanted to, we could play this card, discard all of these characters here with all that ability up to 8, and then get a dragon. Now the next phase here is called the engagement phase, and this is tied directly to the character phase. So at this moment, nobody has really done anything yet. So I can choose to decline to engage with my opponent. If I choose to decline, then I can discard 1, 2, or 3 cards from my hand and put it in the discard pile, and then immediately my turn will be over, and then I'll draw back up to my hand size. So I don't want to get into a fight. I kind of want to let my opponent make the first move, which you might do. Then you can go ahead and decline to engage. If there was currently a fight happening, then I can choose to continue the fight, try to beat my opponent, or I can retreat. Now if you ever retreat, then you're basically handing your opponent a dragon, if not more. Now the thing about retreating is you might want to get out of a fight that you're pretty sure you can't win, so that your opponent doesn't, hurt you worse and maybe grab 2 dragons or even more sometimes. Now let's say for argument's sake, first turn we want to go ahead and engage immediately with our opponent. We're going to go to the 4th step, which is the character phase. At this point we have to play a character, and so we're going to go ahead and play Spark here. Now there's a couple of things you can see with this basic character here. He has 2 kinds of strength. We've got the fire strength and the earth strength. We're going to play that there, and then we're going to choose at this point, we're going to declare which element we're fighting. So either the fire strength is going to count and the earth strength is going to be ignored, or vice versa. So since he's got the 4th, for argument's sake, we'll say we're going to fight with fire. Now it must be noted, you've either got to play a character or retreat at this point. So moving on to our opponent's turn, when it got to his character phase, he'd have to retreat, at which point we would take a dragon, or he would be forced to play a character equal to or higher than our character's fire ability. And I should note that you can only play 1 character per turn. There are some abilities and things that'll let you break that rule, but for the most part in all of these phases you can play 1 of the cards. So you can do 1 leadership and then 1 character. So after we've played a character, we're going to go to the booster/support phase. Now in this phase we can play either 1 booster or 1 support card. If we play a support card, we're going to take and we're going to put that here in our support area, and it's feasible that you may have several support cards over here, or you may play a booster card here, and this actually goes directly onto the character and will interact with the character itself. Now if on later turns I go to play another character, you're going to cover up that character, and now you're going to reset your current power ability to this current display. So if we had done this, let's say this was our first turn here, we played Spark and then we played a support, then our power declaration is going to be 7 fire. So if we came along on a later turn and then we played this gal here, we'll play that. We've got 2 fire, plus 3 is 5, but since we played this last turn, now we can play here a booster card, and it says here, excuse me, my total power increases to 6. But remember, we've covered this one up, so this other character, as you play turn after turn, is not going to count for your current total. Again, there are effects and abilities that will break different rules. So you'll declare your powers, announce the total of all your power from all the different effects, and then you'll refresh your hand back up to 6 cards from your draw deck. And then you'll apply any end of turn effects from any cards you may have out on the board. So that very simply and very consistently, even throughout all of these more advanced decks, is the game. You're going to decide if you want to retreat, maybe play a leadership card to start your turn, play some characters, figure out how many support cards and things you want to commit to the current battle, because again, the whole key to this is that you have to play a character. Once a battle has started, you've got to play some kind of character or retreat. If you play your big character first and then your opponent comes back with another big character plus a support, then you've committed too early, and now all you're left with is these little weenie characters here, and you're going to be forced to retreat. Now it should be noted, if you're the first person to initiate a fight, then you cannot play any booster or support cards on that character. All you're stuck with is the 1 character to start the fight, and then on subsequent turns either player can play 1 booster or 1 support with their character. Now there is one very interesting wrinkle to this whole dynamic here. Let's say at some point we've got a support here, we've got another character, and we added a little booster, we got another support here. If our total of cards in our combat area and support area, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. if I've got 6 cards and my opponent retreats, or 6 or more cards, then I get to actually drag 2 dragons over to my side. So if it was a situation like this, let's say my opponent there, he had 1 dragon from a previous fight, then I won this and I had really committed my forces, and I had, let's say 10 cards, I'm going to bring 1 over, and then the second dragon, of course, will come to my side. So you can kind of swing the match that way. And that's something to be interested in, because if you see your opponent really feels like they're going to come out strong and you don't really have a good chance, you want to retreat before they build up too much of a mass here to bring over 2, and possibly with some other special effects, more than 2 dragons. So let's look at some basic special abilities of some of the cards in these first 2 basic decks. Well, very simply, some characters are going to be very strong in an element and very weak in another. They may be more evenly balanced. So this is an example of somebody that is going to do you no good in Earth. So that's very basic. Now if we look here at this little shield here, that means if the current fight is in Earth, you can play this card ignoring what your opponent's current value is. So if we take a look over there, he's got a 1 value of Earth. So if we were fighting Earth here, then normally I would not be able to play this card, but this shield kind of allows you to ignore the current power value and sneak 1 in. So that may buy yourself an extra play, maybe to draw more cards, maybe you play some effects to draw some extra cards, or it can just be kind of a way to suck some more cards out of your opponent. Here's an example of a support card that is going to give you more dragons. And this, I want to read this out loud because it's very different than your Magic the Gathering style ability text. So this says, if you retreat, I attract 1 additional dragon. So the idea is that you actually read these out loud, which you normally do in Magic and things like that. But it's very much, very personal, I guess. So you're very much talking to your opponent, and you play this. You say, hey, if you retreat, I attract 1 additional dragon. Very simple. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it doesn't take that long to get used to it. And here's another card here. You cannot play character cards that do not have special power text. So that's a very interesting thing. I play this character, it's very low, so I maybe will play this to start the initial combat, and then now you can't play anybody that doesn't have some kind of cool special ability. So in the case of this guy, if he was in your deck, even though he's really big and beefy, hey, you're not able to play him. Another example here, you cannot take cards from your draw deck. So that very simply, prevents them from drawing cards for any reason while the support card is out, and that can be very dastardly. Now each of the basic decks, or the starter decks I should say, have these mutants in here. And you can see they both have the ignore ability, but they also have a kind of a conditional text. So for example, I may only play this card if the contested element is Earth, and your total power is at least 5. The contested element of the fight changes to fire. So you would play that, and it has the ignore ability, so you can only play that if it's 5 or more, and even though you would be breaking the rules of having to play at least or more than the power, you've got the little shield there. However, it also has this little stop icon, and this basically says you're done. You can't play any more cards, you're going to skip your booster support phase, and you're done with this guy. So this is kind of a nice get out of jail free card. And this is kind of a theme throughout all of the decks. Now all of these have these mutants, but you're going to have to get to know all of the different special abilities and combos and things, and once you play against a deck once, you're going to have some idea of what that's capable of and how you kind of should push the issue with your opponent in terms of the current fight. Now finally here we also have this card. This is from the other deck, and this has a little retrieve here. So if you have this character out at your beginning phase, before you even do your leadership, you can actually retrieve this back into your hand. And this is actually pretty cool because you could get this out if you maybe played a card that was too big early, and you can retrieve and play it out because you don't have anything else good in your hand. This can come in handy. Now if your opponent also has a retrieve symbol out on the board, then you cannot do this ability. So only if this is only for you. Basically they kind of cancel each other out. So let's quickly go through the basic decks just to give you an idea of what's in store. Now here's the Mimic deck, and this little icon here basically means it's free. So this one breaks your 1 character per turn limit. So if I played her, I could play another one. So she comes out for free. And this one here, I just want to show you that even the other 2 basic decks I showed you have icons that aren't necessarily used a lot within the core sort of theme of the deck, but this is a gang icon, and there's also some other icons in here that are in the basic decks that you kind of ignore for your first couple of plays until you learn what all these new rules do. So I just wanted to show you an example of that. Now this one has the kind of twin icon there, and what you can do is if you find another card that has the twin icon and the first name, or excuse me, the first word is the same, then you can play them at once together. Well, you can see these two have different names, so but these two here would actually work. So Spirit of Night, Spirit of Light, you can play them as a twin, and you see instead of 5 or 2 you're going to have 7. And then this one here, we have 2 Amazons here. We have the Amazon Leaping High and the Amazon Leaping Far, so we can play them together as a twin. Now the Falk deck has a pretty much kind of the same theme as that Mimic deck with a lot of these twins and things, but as you can see it has a lot of these retrieve abilities as well. So again, each of these decks is kind of base itself around a theme or a mechanic. Now we're going to look at the Kind deck. And these are very small characters, but you can see they have that gang symbol that I was talking about. So when you go to play these, you can play as many as you want of the matching gang colors. You can see these 2 red ones, or these 2 sort of brown ones, or 3 brown ones, and then we've got a whole bunch of yellow ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you wanted to, you could really kind of commit a large amount of characters all at once to build up a whole bunch of power. And there's some other different special abilities and things obviously that go with these. So that's the other kind of little icon that this deck introduces. Now the Terra deck doesn't introduce any new icons. They have a lot of cards that are going to mess with the support row and kind of just overall mess with the opponent, but they also have these Storm support cards. And a lot of them basically say this: if I have more than one active Storm support card during my beginning phase, I immediately attract 1 dragon. So this is kind of another interesting way that instead of through combat, they're going to actually play these sort of storm, elemental, crazy happenings that are going to get the dragons over to their side. The new concept here in the Pillar deck is basically this idea here of disclosing your hand. And when this has been played and you disclose your hand, then the opponent will have to put a bunch of the cards up in front of them, whatever their current hand is. Any new cards that they draw is going to be, you know, kept in their hand hidden, but you can see what you have in store for you. This one will also let you discard some cards from your opponent and things like that. Now the last deck here is the Aqua deck. The new icon they introduced is this protection icon, and this basically means that this can't be targeted or affected by any special effects. It's protected. Finally, the last deck here is the Bucha deck, and this is kind of a seafaring ship deck. So you can see we've got a few ships. You can see here, this little square here, this is the number of influence, so to speak, that you can put on a ship. So when you play a ship, you're just going to play it if you're off here onto the side of the board. And then later on, during your support phase, you can play characters and support cards and things like that over to your ship up to its maximum value. Then at the beginning phase of your turn, before you even play your leadership card, you can kind of undock your ship and then play any cards that were on your ship into, you know, your combat area or your support area. So it's kind of an interesting balancing act in that regard, from, you know, kind of building up and teching up and, you know, storing up a big old, you know, one big turn versus, you know, defending off and keeping off your opponent while you're doing that. Finally, the last icon to talk about here are these bluff icons. So you can see there's different colors here, and if we zoom in a little bit, you can see there's green, and then I thought there's a yellow one there. There's yellow, and then there's some neutral ones. Now what you do with these bluff cards is, so see, even though this is a character, I can go ahead and put that face down into my support area, and while it's in there face down, it counts as 2 power for whatever the current contested element is, and 0 power for the opposite element. But at any time during my power phase, when I'm declaring how much power I have in my turn, my opponent can declare a bluff. So if this was, let's say, fire there, then they declare a bluff, and I'll reveal that, and I'll say, whoop, this here, that is green, so that is a failure there. So if any cards do not match the current icon, then what happens is the opposing player, he's going to get a dragon, and then I'm going to retreat, and so he maybe will get more dragons after that. Now, if all of the icons, the bluff icons that I have out there, match the contested element, then in that case I will attract a dragon to my side and then discard all my bluff cards. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. This is an interesting kind of game. So it kind of goes against a lot of the tropes and things that I've gathered from Magic the Gathering and Netrunner and different games like that. where it's very much kind of a pure number crunchy game, but on the other hand, it's really not. It's very hard to classify this game. Now, it's very much a head-to-head game, but there's not really a lot of combat. I don't feel like, you know, people are hitting each other directly. So it's a Kinesia game, so it has that, you know, sort of numbery kind of thing. It's not really a math thing. But, you know, I'm making that sound probably drier than it actually ends up being when you play the game. Now, the interesting thing about this game to me is no matter which deck I'm playing, they all kind of feel the same in some ways, but then on the other hand, they don't. So, as I alluded to in the walkthrough of the rules, you're very much trying to figure out when to retreat, when to commit a lot of cards, you know, trying to get those extra dragons out, but not overcommitting so that, you know, you wasted all your firepower and now your opponent has the upper hand. And I did also mention that, you know, one of the ways that you win is you get all 3 dragons and then you play enough cards to attract another dragon that doesn't exist. That will trigger the end of the game and you get a whole bunch of crystals that way. Now, I've never seen a game end that way. Every time I play the game, it's always by somebody going out of cards. Either you retreat, you don't have any cards to commit, or you just finished a battle and you're totally out of cards, and then whoever has, you know, the most dragons or whatever, then you get the crystal or more crystals, depending on the number of dragons or how you're, you know, playing the game. So there's a lot to be said about that as well. That end game of kind of going back and forth on the cards. I've seen somebody almost get all 4 dragons just because the person that kind of overspent their cards doesn't really have anything to answer with at the end of the game as they're playing cards. You know, you got to play these different characters. And it's like, man, I got nothing. I shot them out, and so the dragons just kind of slowly start moving over to the other player. So once you realize that, once that's happened to you, then you kind of start playing the long game. And that's what's really cool about this game is this really extended hand management over the course of the entire game, where it's not just about the cards that you have. Because they are pre-constructed decks, you really want to know what your opponent has, what's in your deck. That's very vital to how you play the game. So that's nice because that adds a ton of replayability to the game. I mean, even the basic deck, you know, the I can't remember what they're called, the Hoke and the other one, the Vera deck, even those, there's not a lot of special abilities in those, but you still want to kind of know, okay, here's his big hitter, here he played his mutant that came with the deck, and so you kind of want to hold those cards and wait for those opportune moments, and then realize when they've been played, and then maybe you can commit back. So even within those 2 basic decks, there's still a good, you know, 5-6 plays in those decks. But then after you play those a few times, you can go play the others, and then you play the others and play the others, and then you can work your way all the way back and then play, you know, one of the more complex versus one of the more simple decks. And you really need to know, though, what's in their deck. So that's good and bad, because once I play a deck, I'm like, I don't have anything, and you're getting all the good cards. Well, you kind of know when to commit and when to hold them and when to fold them idea. So it's really cool in that way. And they do give you some good variety above and beyond those 9 decks, which I think could give you, I mean, I've played this game a lot, actually, frankly. I probably played it about 15 times or so, right in there. Kind of stopped keeping track after a while. But, you know, even with the basic decks, I feel like I've got another, I mean, I really don't know, like 10, 15 plays just with that. And I've never even tried to draft, which I really enjoy doing. I've never tried any of the basic, not the emissaries, but there's like the Inquisitor cards that you can add and different things. There's some other little crystal cards that can change up the rules of the deck building. So there's a lot here, and it's pretty cool because it's like you got an LCG, but it's in one box. You never have to buy anything again, and you've got 9 basic decks multiplied by the different emissaries, multiplied by drafting and doing construction. So you've got a lot of possibilities here to explore and play with those decks. But because of the nature of the mechanics of the game, it is very kind of vital to know, you know, what everybody's got, what they could be playing. And, you know, it's because it's really kind of a push your luck idea. It's like, okay, I'm committing, I'm going. Oh, it blew up in my face because they had their big 7 drop, you know, that came out. So, but that's good. I mean, that's a good thing. I'm saying that, I feel like as I'm saying it, I feel like, man, that sounds negative. But it's not, because you have that kind of hanging over your head as you're playing. You're really scared to put out your big cards. After you've played this a few times, you realize that, ooh, I don't want to put this out, because if I don't win with this card, then I'm in a world of hurt. So that's really the interesting part of the game, and that is consistent across all the decks. So that's, to me, that's very interesting, because you have that same basic core consistency, and then all of these different special abilities tacked on around it don't really change the game. They just kind of change the meta between you and hopefully somebody else that has played it as much as you. So those things are kind of competing, because you really need somebody that's going to play this with you a lot. And that's why I think, you know, my little subtitle says Lost Cities kind of thing. And the thing with Lost Cities is you want to play that with the same person a lot. And I think that's the same with this game. You want to play it, get a partner, you know, spouse, whatever, somebody that you can play this with a whole bunch, so you both kind of get each other's play styles, and then you can kind of try to second guess each other. And then there you go. That's what you got. So Blue Moon Legends, take a look at it. Thanks.